G'day humans, welcome to the safe space for dangerous ideas. Here's a dangerous idea for you. We are currently sleepwalking towards a society where it's increasingly difficult to have the most important conversations that we need to have to survive the 21st century, because we are so fearful of becoming riven by algorithmic hate-filled nonsense that we pass bullshit laws banning people from saying unpopular things. I want to draw a connection today between the Premier of New South Wales, that's like the governor of the most populous state in Australia, Chris Minns, a big advocate of hate speech bans, introduced legislation here, similar legislation to what is occurring in other states as well, like Victoria, and at a federal level, saying that if you say certain things or you wave a swastika or whatnot, or you protest too close to a house of worship, boom, you're out. They're slapping the handcuffs on you, and you're feeling the jackboot of the state. The gendarmes are coming for you. The reason why I find this worrying is because I just had the misfortune to go and see Snow White, the new Disney movie, with my children. It may seem like a stretch. You may not know where I'm going with this. Hear me out here. The Snow White movie is what you get culturally if you see through to its fullest expression the kind of sentiment, the kind of worldview that lurks behind hate speech bans. Here's what the Premier of New South Wales had to say to people who want to repeal the hate speech legislation a few weeks ago.
There's been some that have been agitating in the Parliament to nullify the laws, to remove them off the statute books. Think about what kind of toxic message that would send to the New South Wales community. And I think the advocates for those changes need to explain, what do they want people to have the right to say? What kind of racist abuse do they want to see or be able to lawfully see on the streets of Sydney? I recognise, and I've fully said from the beginning, that we don't have the same freedom of speech laws that they have in the United States. And the reason for that is that we want to hold together our multicultural community and have people live in peace, free from the kind of vilification and hatred that we do see around the world.
So there you have it. What is it that people like me wish we could say? What hate-filled bile is on the tip of my tongue just bursting to come out that is only prevented from contaminating this great country of ours, this great tolerant multicultural country of ours, by the laws passed by Chairman Minns? Well, let me tell you a little thing or two about the Snow White movie in order to get us there. You may know that there was some controversy about the Snow White motion picture because it takes some different choices, different creative choices, shall we say, from the 1937 original. Because you may be shocked and horrified to learn that the 1937 original Snow White animated Disney film, perhaps the most important and foundational animated movie of all time, that did not necessarily concur precisely with the social justice dogmas of a left-wing elite in 2025. There were just a few differences. They unfortunately failed to build a time machine, go forward about 100 years into the future, see what the norms were going to be, and then retroactively include them in the Snow White of 1937. So the first thing that had to go from the new film was Snow White herself. Well, not exactly. The whiteness of Snow White had to go. In the original fairy tale, in the original story, in the original movie, Snow White's skin is as white as snow. That's why she's called Snow White, because she has white skin. She's a pale lady. Think imagine like a Scandinavian lass with skin so white it's almost translucent. It's like you can see the blue blood veins underneath, like some kind of an amphibious fish, like that you can see the heart beating underneath. That was Snow White in 1937. Wasn't necessarily good, wasn't necessarily bad. That was just Snow White. She's only one person. She can't carry the weight of the world's expectations about race on her shoulders, or can she? Well, in 2025 she can, of course. So they changed the Snow White, and they say in the very first scene of the motion picture film, they say she was named Snow White because she was born during a blizzard. She was born during a blizzard, so that's why they called her Snow White, because there was a lot of white stuff around the castle when she was born. And they cast, obviously, a non-white actress, a Latina. So that's great. We've got the diversity checkbox ticked there. But then we get to the questions about the story itself and whether or not it's appropriate for a young princess to pine for a prince. One of the most iconic songs from the original Snow White film, in fact, one of the most iconic songs in the whole Disney pantheon, is a song called Someday My Prince Will Come. And she's singing about how someday she wants a prince to come and she wants to live happily ever after. Well, we can't have that in the 2020s. The idea that a member of one sex might desire a member of the other sex and somehow be saved by that coupling? No. I mean, that would work, obviously, if it was a male wanting a woman because, males are fallen and women are fabulous. So you could do it if it was a queer story. But you can't have a young, empowered woman in this era of girl power. Girl power, bro. She don't need no prince. She's a sassy broad. She's got everything figured out for herself. So they get rid of the song entirely. They get rid of the most iconic song. Well, I guess Hi Ho, It's Off to Work We Go is another iconic song. We will get to that one in a sec. They get rid of Someday My Prince Will Come, and they replace it with a new number. I got a piece of paper here because I couldn't remember it because it's such a forgettable song. I got a piece of paper that says, instead, Snow White performs a new song titled Waiting on a Wish. Now, Waiting on a Wish is about her sense of her own empowerment and how she's just looking forward to being a big, sassy, brassy broad and is going to go out and conquer the world. She don't need nobody. She don't need nobody, this Latina Snow White, who's not white as the snow, but the snow. She is called white because of the snow, but not as white as the snow. There's no amphibious fish pumping a heart behind her skin. She's her own lady. She's her own lass, and good for her. It's the 2020s now. So a couple of years ago, when the actress who plays Snow White was interviewed, when she got the part, now she's only a 23-year-old lass. She's going to remain a lass for the purposes of this conversation. When this 23-year-old lass got the part, she was 21 years of age. She's a bebe. When you're 21, you're a little bebe. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just saying bebe things. So she's saying bebe stuff, and she says it's very old-fashioned, the whole film. She was like, this 1937 film, she was shocked. She was shocked to learn that a film made literally before the Second World War was old-fashioned. Who would, what was the opinion of Walt Disney about trans people? I'm not sure. But anyway, she was shocked. And so she gave a few interviews, and she got herself into some hot water a couple of years ago when she was 21 years of age. Because she said, and I quote, the original film was extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power. Right. It was outdated about women being in roles of power. She said there's a big focus, in the original film that is, on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird, said the actress. So we didn't do that this time, she said. So good for them. Good for them. Good for her for channeling the girl power of the 2020s, and not the retrograde, misogynistic, patriarchal, sexist nonsense of a woman wanting a man and falling in love with a guy who literally stalks her. Like, courtship is so old-fashioned. Courtship is violence, words of violence. So anyway, they changed that. They change Prince Charming, in fact, from a prince to a guy named Jonathan. That's a true statement of fact about the new Snow White motion picture. There is no Prince Charming. It's a dude, and the dude's name is Jonathan. And Jonathan he's kind of a Robin Hood character. He's like, he has to be, you can't have him be a prince because they're too fancy. He's a ne'er-do-well, shall we say. But he's a raffish, rugged, charming ne'er-do-well. And he has a merry band of brothers, and I'll come to those in just a moment. But suffice it to say, he doesn't stalk her in an unseemly way. There are no unwanted overtures. Apparently Prince Charming was a little bit too Kevin Spacey for the 2020s, a bit too handsy. So we have him step back, be respectful. We have the princess be a person who would never deign to sing a song like "Someday My Prince Will Come." She's not as white as snow, so we've covered all our bases. You can just imagine the executives at Disney with their list of their checklist, right? Probably issued by the Premier of New South Wales, about things that you're not supposed to say, things that you're not supposed to represent, things you're not supposed to imply, things you're not supposed to do. And they're going tick, tick, tick. Okay, we've got the woman of color in the lead role. We've gotten rid of the reference to her skin being white as the pure snow. We got rid of her pining for a guy. We got rid of the guy being a prince. We got rid of the guy stalking/courting her. But now we come to a doozy. Holy Mother of Mercy. You know what else this movie contains? You know what other horrendous transgressions the original Snow White indulged in on the eve of the Second World War, probably inspired by Adolf Hitler himself? It had people with dwarfism in it. It had people living triumphantly, may I say, happily and triumphantly with the condition that is no worse than able-bodiedness, dwarfism. And they were happy people. They were happy dwarves. They weren't dwarves. They were people living with dwarfism. But how do you do that in the 2020s? Holy Mother of Mercy. Holy Nelly. That's what I says to myself. So they go back and they go, all right, well, we can't cast people with dwarfism in this because the dwarves, I guess, are inherently, they're sort of looked down upon. They're objects of ridicule or they're objectified in some way. So they go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make CGI, those creepy CGI faces that don't really look like real people. Like, Tom Hanks in like the Christmas train movie, where, they're just weird looking movies. Just weird looking faces. So they look kind of like that. There's no spirit behind the eyes. There's no characterization. And then they go, well, hang on. Now we've just done out of a job 7 actors with dwarfism who now don't get to star in our movie. I mean, there aren't that many jobs for little people. They got Game of Thrones, and then they got dwarf throwing championships or some such. So give them a job. But no, they want to be so politically correct. They're not going to give them work. Instead, they're going to get a computer to make renditions of the 7 dwarves. And then, by the way, the word dwarf is never uttered. You never even hear it. You never hear it or see it, or it's a word that dare not mention its name in the new Snow White. There is no mention of dwarves. There are just these CGI creatures who happen to look like people with dwarfism. So what do? They go, well, hang on, this is no good. We can't have no people with dwarfism in the movie. So why don't we give Jonathan, the prince who's not a prince, who kind of wants to spend his life with Snow White, but not so much that it's creepy. Why don't we give him a ragtag team of individuals who follow him, like a band of merry brothers, right? And there are 7 of them, some of whom have dwarfism also, but aren't the dwarves of Snow White and the 7 Dwarves. Literally. So Jonathan has 7 followers who follow him around to do his Robin Hooding, one of whom is an actor who was in, can you guess what he was in? Game of Thrones, only other place where little people get work in Hollywood. He was in Game of Thrones. They cast him in the new movie of Snow White and the 7 Dwarves, but not as a dwarf, because that would be politically incorrect. They cast him as a normal person. His size is never referred to. They cast him as one of the teammates of the prince who's not a prince, who's very respectful of Snow White and doesn't try to court her too hard. So you're watching this thing and you're going, okay, here's the Snow White who's not white, and she's not, the whiteness is not about the snow, or rather her skin is not about being as white as the snow. The whiteness is only just an homage in her name to the fact that there was a blizzard. And then there's no prince, and there's no "Someday My Prince Will Come" song. There's only a song about her being an empowered, sassy, broad, a lady of the 2020s, a powerful power woman, a C-suite. I can have it all, a Sheryl Sandberg. And then she comes upon these 7 creatures, CGI creatures, who are never referred to as dwarves, but then we need to cast dwarves as well, so let's cast them in this other group of 7 people who are not referred to in any way other than being the team that Jonathan, the non-prince, takes around, and one of them is an actor with dwarfism. Now, the studio at the world premiere in Los Angeles declined to have any media at the red carpet because they didn't want the cast to be answering any potentially provocative questions about any of this, let alone their opinions about Israel and Palestine, which is a whole other shitstorm for the studio. But the whole film is like you asked a really, really woke AI to just cobble together the most anodyne, inoffensive shards of intellectual social justice pap into a mosaic of utter, unappealing, uninventive, uncreative, uncourageous nonsense. It is a vomit bag of a movie. My kids loved it. They thought it was great. You know, they're 7. They don't understand any of this. There's some singing CGI little people, and then there's Jonathan, the non-prince, and, wham bam, you're all good. But a little part of my soul died. It is a desecration of an intellectual asset, of a gem of creativity. It is a desecration of a part of the Western canon. It is a desecration of something that is fundamental to the DNA of Hollywood. Those early Disney films, what the modern Disney studio has done is unforgivable. It has taken a gigantic steaming dump on the heritage of Walt Disney, on the most valuable thing about the Disney Corporation, which is its original instantiation as the most creative and forward-thinking and brave and innovative studio doing animation in the world. And the original Snow White in 1937 is the apotheosis of that heritage, of that tradition. And to take it and to feed it through the stupid, dewy-eyed, doughy-brained mandates of a new, very, very temporary social justice agenda that will seem as ridiculous in 10 years as any fad always readily seems. This is just a way of trashing a brand, and the studio executives should be ashamed of themselves. They will be ashamed of this if they're not already. It's like a distillation of what happens when the reticence to offend becomes the singular priority in any creative pursuit. Snow White is the dystopia that people like me fear that hate speech bans will lead to. This is the kind of anodyne, safe bullshit that you get when people are so terrified of treading on any eggshells, of offending anyone, that they're doing backflips and somersaults in order to undo the possible offense that could be caused by their undoing of another thing that might have caused offense to another group when they were trying to undo something that might have caused offense. It's an endless, infinite regress of ass covering and just the most superficial, glib capitulation to a dogma, to really a McCarthyite, Stalinist, thought-policing dogma. And if you think that's hysterical, of course it's hysterical, because in order to get a glimpse of possible dystopias, you have to see the first crack in the door. You have to sort of understand, nothing terrible ever happens without the first few incremental steps. And I do think that just as much of a risk for the 21st century, for us as a civilization, as the sort of Elon Muskian, Trumpian, shitposting, shit-eating grin algorithmic bullshit, is a reaction to that which hunkers us down and makes us less creative, less tolerant, more and more averse to anything that might smell, potentially, like a risky or politically incorrect statement of fact or thought or creativity. So I want to sort of school the Premier and the social justice left on free speech using Snow White as a case study, and I shall do so thusly. The question that the Premier asked in that clip that we just played was, What do opponents of hate speech bans want people to have the right to say? He was very upfront. Like, what is it that you want to say? What is it that you want to say that you can't say? Go on, tell me. Well, firstly, it's a trick question, because anything that is true hate speech is bad enough that you don't want to say it, and anything that's mild enough for you to want to say would not be banned by hate speech laws right now. But that's the relevant point. Right now. We can all think of things that in the past we would like to have been able to say, or we wish people had been able to say, which, from the privileged position of the present day, we regret they're not being able to say, right? COVID lockdowns went too far is a thing that now I would not be punished for saying. But a lady named Zoe Bueller was arrested in Australia during COVID in September of 2020 for posting about an anti-lockdown protest. That was an actual crime. She committed a crime for saying that COVID lockdowns had gone too far and for trying to agitate against them. Another thing that you might want to have been able to say is that nobody should be fired for reporting on pediatric transgender medical care. But I know people who lost their jobs at some of the most august newspapers in Australia for merely daring some years ago, at the peak of the sort of post-George Floyd social justice panic, fired for simply reporting on a controversy inside the medical establishment about how to treat kids with gender dysphoria. Another thing that you might want to have been able to say is nobody should be fired for arguing that there may be circumstances under which a white person can discuss the N-word and say that word while they're trying to discuss its usage. Well, I know people who were fired. Mike Pesca, my friend and colleague, lost his job not for saying the word, not for even writing the word, but for articulating the point of view that it should be possible for a white person to discuss the usage of the word. Another thing that might have been nice to be able to say was that the 9/11 terrorists were not cowardly. That's something that Bill Maher did say on the air in the wake of 9/11, and he lost his show on ABC TV in the United States for saying so. Everyone was saying, oh, this is a cowardly attack, the cowardly attack. He said, come on, it may be dastardly, it may be a lot of things. They weren't cowards. Flying a plane into a building isn't cowardly. Lost his show. You know, people were banned from Twitter for posting men aren't women at the height of the social justice moral panic. So don't give me this bullshit about what is it that you would like to say right now that I can try to pin you down on cynically and force you to say that would be in breach of hate speech laws. That's not the point. The point is that our understanding of what is worth saying and what isn't worth saying is at every point in time incomplete. And there are things that we understand now to be hate speech that in 20 years' time we'll look back on and go, oh, we probably got that wrong. I mean, unless the Premier of New South Wales thinks that this is the first time and place in the history of the world where we understand perfectly everything that should be said and should not be said. We can see perfectly well that everyone else in every previous place and every previous era had blind spots. And in the future, we'll be able to see that of other places and other peoples. But we right now, we are the first time and place in human history who have got everything right. In the future, nobody's going to look back on our current moment and go, well, obviously they had blind spots about this. No. In perpetuity, everyone in the world is going to go, you know what? Yeah, New South Wales in 2025, they nailed it. They nailed it. You know, over the long arc of human history, the thousands of years of human civilization, no one quite got there. But I think the Chris Minns government in the 2020s was the first time and place where everybody knew exactly what should be said and what shouldn't be said. And there was no need for a capacious, rambunctious understanding of the public square because we could just carve out from the public square the things that we didn't like, and there were no mistakes. So it was lucky. Lucky that his antipathy to free speech coincides perfectly with the moment at which we don't need full free speech. Do these people not see the tradition that they're part of? Do they not understand the kind of mob justifications that pontificating people who are in favour of speech restrictions are always falling back on? They are part of a long and timeless tradition. They are part of a McCarthyite, kind of Stalinist attitude towards deciding what can and can't be said. Like, what do you want? You can imagine this, going back to the Snow White film, right? You can imagine the studio executives saying, like, why is it necessary to be peddling the tropes of the 1930s in the 2020s? Like, what is it that you really want to say, that you think is so important to be said, that, you know, the 1930s film really had to say? You want to say that it's good to be white. Really? It's so important to you to say that it's good to be white? It's so important to you to retain that aspect of the film, the implication that Snow White was called Snow White because her skin was white as snow. You really think it's that important to retain that? You don't think we can just move past that? What else in the 1930s film is so important for you to cling to? You want to say that women can't manage life on their own? You want to have a woman, a young woman, a role model to other girls in the 2020s singing about how someday her prince will come because she's not a full badass girl, a lass in her own right? You want that to be the lesson? Really? You want to stand up and really defend your right to say that women can't manage life on their own? What else is it that you think you should be able to say, or that you think it's so important to say, that you don't want to be cowed by our supposed attack on free speech because we're such nasty wokesters? You want to say that dwarfism is cute, that dwarfism is a joke to you? You think that's really important to you, to say that dwarfism is a cute joke, that we should look down on people with dwarfism? Is that a message that you think it's really important to convey? So you can see how this goes. You can see how people who are hostile to allowing a maximum number of ideas to circulate can always use the jackboot to try to cow people into phrasing the things that they're trying to play with in such a way that they sound beyond the pale, which then constricts your creativity and constricts your thinking in such a way that you end up with a motherfucking turkey like Snow White. Because you don't want to imply that people with dwarfism are a joke. You don't want to imply that young women need males. You don't want to imply that being white is in any way good. So as the bureaucrats go through the list of things that you don't want to imply, what you end up with is just a mishmash of anodyne, easy, inoffensive nonsense. There's no sparkle, there's no risk, there's no frisson of anything. There's no passion, there's no humanity, there's none of the messiness of the human condition in this stupid fucking film. It is a camel, a horse designed by committee. It is an absolute travesty for the Disney Corporation, for Disney Studios, and I think every person who supports hate speech legislation, who supports banning particular types of speech, should be forced to see Snow White with like a couple of toothpicks holding their eyes open, like in A Clockwork Orange, and watch the whole thing over 100 different times. You know, maybe the virtue in saying things that Chris Minns, the Premier, would find beyond the pale is not in the saying of them themselves, but in being able to walk up to the line, walk up to the edge of saying things that in isolation would sound unseemly. But if we're not terrified of accidentally going over the edge of propriety, in fact foster a superior public square, a more flourishing creative space, a better democracy, than if we were to live in an environment where a pre-selected set of taboos make art and thought and debate stale and Stalinist and predictable and fundamentally dishonest. If you want to see the dystopia that awaits us if we embrace hate speech bans, do yourself a favour. Go and see Snow White.